Welcome to the Friendly Podcast Guide, sorting through podcasts so you don't have to. I'm Andy Smiley, and I want to help you discover the right podcast without having to listen to an entire episode. Now, let's talk podcasts. Hey everyone, welcome back. This week's podcast is called the Balanced Working Mama Podcast, and Ashley Brown, the host of Routine and Things, is the one that recommended it to me, and I am so glad she did. P.S. If you haven't listened to Ashley's episode yet, you definitely should. It's episode 9. I will link it in the show notes. Dr. Amber Thornton is a clinical psychologist, and she is the host of this week's podcast. She helps us work toward the balance we are all searching for. Before we dive into the chat I had with Dr. Amber, and holy cow, it was such a delight to talk to her, here are some details about the show. The show description is, it is absolutely possible to balance work, motherhood, and wellness. Join the Balanced Working Mama each week to learn how. Hosted by Dr. Amber Thornton, clinical psychologist and mama wellness consultant. The length of each episode is about 30 minutes, and according to Dr. Amber, it is kid ear friendly about 50% of the time. She goes into more detail about that in our conversation. It is an ongoing series with new episodes available on Mondays. Before we learn more about the vibe of the show, we're going to take a quick break to talk about friendlypodcastguide.com. I have a website. It's where you can see my latest FPG episode as well as an archive of all of my previous episodes. Also, if you can't remember one of my affiliate links, there's a page where you can find all of those. For all things FPG, you can visit my website, friendlypodcastguide.com. Now we get to hear from Dr. Amber about her journey to motherhood and how it influenced the making of her podcast. I am so excited to have Dr. Amber Thornton on the podcast today. Her podcast is called the Balanced Working Mama Podcast, and holy cow, I need a little bit of balance. So I'm really excited to talk to her today. First of all, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. So hello, and thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Amber, founder of Balanced Working Mama. I am a mom of 2. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So I'm in the 2 toddler phase. But I live in the DC area, my husband and I, and Balanced Working Mama started because I too needed more balance and wellness and motherhood. You know, when I first became a mom, I was really on the fence about it because I was really nervous that I don't know if I can take care of myself and be a mom. So here came Balanced Working Mama, and it's just been amazing ever since.
That's awesome. I feel like even just like being a person, you kind of need a balance. I feel like when you throw motherhood, just being a parent in general, you just need a little help making sure you keep everything balanced.
Agreed.
So you touched on it a little bit, but can you dive a little bit more into why you wanted to start this podcast?
Yes, I can. I distinctly remember, when I was dating my husband and us talking about whether we wanted to have kids. And I was, again, on the fence, and I kind of was just like, I don't know about that. And he was so shocked by it. And he just said, with having kids, we could just do so much good, by bringing, these amazing humans into the world. And so when he said it like that, it made sense to me. But then it also made me realize I needed to figure out how to do motherhood in a way that felt healthy and felt sustainable. Just felt like I was at the center with prioritizing myself and my wellness. And unfortunately, it just wasn't something I had grew up seeing. I think a lot of our moms, sacrificed so much for us and, put us first. And they got really burned out. They didn't take care of themselves. They developed a lot of health conditions from it. I just didn't want that. So I remember becoming a mom, really being very intentional about doing things differently, but then seeing other moms around me, like my friends, really struggling. And so that was really, kind of the trigger for me to say, hey, I think I can help these women by one, kind of sharing what I'm doing to do motherhood differently, but then also just kind of help and coach them as well with my expertise as a psychologist, but then also in other creative ways. And the podcast was actually the first way that we started doing that. So that is how it came to be, me just being really, wanting to help these women around me with finding more balance and wellness too.
That's awesome. And what do you want these women to get out of your podcast?
I want them to understand that it is okay to put themselves first. And one really great way to do it is to take in information like this that really like encourages and emphasizes the idea of putting yourself first, prioritizing your wellness, believing that there is a thing called balance in motherhood. I want them to believe and to understand from the podcast that having balance in motherhood is possible when we redefine it so that they understand that it is something I can do. This is within my grasp. And then them feeling encouraged and inspired to, then go do it for themselves.
That's wonderful. And I feel like sometimes we do just need that push or that reminder that we need balance and that we are important and that we don't have to sacrifice everything for our kids. Like our kids need to see us taking care of ourselves so they know how to take care of themselves later.
Absolutely.
What would you consider the like vibe or the feeling of your show?
So my show is definitely pretty lighthearted. If anyone who follows me on Instagram, you all know I curse. And so if you don't like those words, it might come as a shock to you. Like every now and then I say bad words, but there is also so many gems in it. Because I am a psychologist still, there's a lot of wellness talk, a lot of mental health talk, but really the vibe of the show is just a casual conversation with another mama who really wants you to do well and really wants to support you and, providing you with information, but then also personal reflection about how she's doing it and how you can also take part and do it too. So that's, I think, the vibe of the show.
I love that. Okay. And you have to tell me, where did you get your psychology degree?
I got my degree from Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
Their clinical psychology program there.
Nice. And you have a PhD, right?
Well, close. I have a PsyD. And so in psychology, they're both clinical psychology degrees. They're both 5 to 7 year graduate programs. PhDs typically focus more on research, where PsyDs focus more on clinical practice. PsyDs are actually becoming a lot more popular nowadays. Psychologists are going that route because most of us, when we finish our programs, we end up being clinicians. We practice, we do therapy, we do assessments. Not as many of us become academics, which is what the PhD prepares you for, but they ultimately still prepare you for the same career. So this is a different model of training.
Okay. Sorry. Sidetrack. Can you tell me, okay, I know this is going to be hard, but can you tell me a favorite episode or two that I can point my listeners to?
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Ooh, okay. So we actually have a new episode. Oh, there's so many. Okay. Actually, I'll just say the most recent episode. It is episode 75, I believe, and it is called When Anxiety Shows Up in Motherhood. That is a good one because I think it blends very well the two realities for me of like being an actual psychologist, but then also someone who struggles with anxiety in motherhood. And so I really got very transparent about my experience with postpartum anxiety, what I did for that, which was go find my own therapist and seek my own treatment. But then I also just talked through like how anxiety can manifest differently for every mom, how mental health manifests differently, and some things that we can do to make sure our mental health is cared for. So I like that episode, because I felt like I was able to kind of like go between the personal and the professional a little bit, but also because I think a lot of us are talking about mental health a lot more in motherhood, and anxiety is a big thing.
Definitely. And I feel like anxiety, especially because I feel like we learn how to cope with anxiety when we don't have kids. But I feel like when you add another human that you're like worried about and taking care of, it like opens a whole nother like almost version of anxiety, at least in my opinion.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Okay. You did talk about cursing. Would you consider your podcast okay for little ears, or probably like stick the headphones in?
So, honestly, it depends on the episode. There are some episodes where I don't say bad words. I also have a lot of episodes where we have special guests and not all of my guests curse. But I would say it's probably 50-50 chance that you might hear me say a curse word. So you might want to put your headphones in if there are some around.
Perfect. I feel like, but that's the beauty of podcasts is you can just stick your headphones in. Yeah, you don't have to like I don't know, leave the room. You can just do a headphone.
That's
Perfect.
it.
Okay. Is there anything else that you want to touch on that we didn't talk about yet?
I'm excited for mamas to connect through the podcast. And, I've loved our podcast. It's been such a great place and a space for mamas to really just feel validated and comfortable and knowing that they are not alone. And I'm so excited to connect with anyone who joins and listens.
Definitely. I'm excited that my listeners get to join in this fabulous community that you have. And where can people find you?
I basically live on Instagram at Dr. Amber Thornton. So DrAmberThornton. We also have an Instagram for Balanced Working Mama at Balanced Working Mama. But then the podcast is everywhere. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Anchor, anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Okay, fabulous. I will make sure to link all of those in the show notes so people can just jump right to wherever they want to go.
Awesome.
And that is everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want to hear about more podcasts from me, please follow or subscribe on your podcast app of choice. If you want more FPG goodness, or you just can't remember the link for the Olive and June nail polish discount, head on over to friendlypodcastguide.com. Talk to you soon. I had to figure out podcasts all by myself. And now I've got it figured out. But like, it would have been really nice, like 5 years ago when I had my first kid, like to have someone be like, here's some options for you. Figure out what you like.
Yep. And because I don't always have time to like research and like figure it out, right. So like, I really love this idea, the podcast.
Thank you.
It's the best podcast idea.